Hello everyone, welcome back to the Group 2 YouTube channel. So far we have completed 2 out of the 3 Holy Trinity maintenance items for this E46 M3. To recap, first we have replaced the rod bearings. The second items we did was repairing the vanos system. Now we're going to reinforce the rear subframe.
As we mentioned on the first video of this series, all E46 chassis are prone to rear subframe cracking, especially those that are driven hard or on the track. Now it is especially prevalent on models like the M3 because they have more power and all of their components are bigger and larger and put more stress on the same frame.
Now the rear subframe usually cracks at any of these 4 diff carrier mounting points.
So if we take a look on this car, from what we can see without dropping the subframe still, there is no cracking, but normally the cracking will start where this bolt hole actually is in the frame. You'll see a little slit. And then if we were to drop it, you'll see just how big that slit is and that it goes all the way through. Now when that goes all the way through and the subframe does decide to flex and crack completely, it's gonna tear out of this pocket right there and you'll be left with a giant hole in your subframe. So what's next for us on this car is preparing everything to have the rear subframe be dropped. That includes the drive shaft, the differential itself, the rear sway bar. We'll go through these things as we lower the rear subframe in order to reinforce it. So while we work on getting the rear subframe removed from the car, we can go over the products that we have and are going to install in the rear subframe. Those will be PowerFlex bushings, a mix of the street and race, as well as a subframe reinforcement kit. This one specifically is from Turner Motorsport. So we found by using a mix of street bushings on the subframe and Black Series race bushings on the diff mount itself, we get a really nice driving dynamic similar to stock, but without any sort of jerking or knocking or rocking from the rear diff. So since part of the subframe reinforcement involves us welding from the top side, we have to remove all the carpeting from the trunk. On the interior, we also want to remove the battery because we don't want the battery in the car while we're welding. Make sure you have a second or third hand to help you remove the exhaust. Now, since it is a 3-piece exhaust, you do technically only need to remove sections 2 and 3. But in this case, we were missing a part of our section 1, so we just took the whole thing off and we got the replacement for when we reinstalled the subframe and put everything back together.
Basically, I have to remove all of the undershielding here to, one, get the drive shaft out, just connect that from the differential. And then we'll drop the entire subframe, struts, brakes, all in one piece, so we can put the new bushings onto it and then begin welding in our reinforcement plates. So without a good press, it takes a little bit of air hammer, chisel to finally get the bushing out, and it's nice and mangled.
Now, if caught early enough, you won't have to drop the gas tank like we did on this car. The reason we did that is if we take a look at this crack, it ran all the way back here behind the gas tank, and we wouldn't be able to weld that normally. So before we begin welding, we're going to finish cleaning up the underside here, get rid of all this dirt, and see if any of the cracks protrude any further on the car. After that, we'll get to welding. Scott has welded the cracks here, since the plates don't have coverage over those spots. For the front subframe mounting points, you're actually going to lay the plate in place and then put the bolt back in to secure it for welding. Part of the subframe reinforcement is actually reinforcing from the top side as well. What we're going to be doing is, after cutting out these two squares on both sides, these little T's are actually going to be cut because they are weak points, and then filled. And then we take two plates and weld them back over. So here we have the diff mount bushing components for the rear section of the diff that we've just pressed out. PowerFlex does supply some grease with all of their bushing kits, which is required for an easy installation. Just like with the rear mount bushings, the rear differential front mount bushing comes with a hardware kit and some grease. The grease specifically is applied on the inside of the bush here, not on the outside. We don't want that rotating. It's advisable to use 2 people because it's fairly heavy components, and lining everything up yourself is going to be pretty hard. Now, we aren't doing PowerFlex bushings on the control arms on this car. We are just replacing them with stock bushings. So it is a little bit less difficult if you have PowerFlex, because once you do manage to get everything pressed out, polyurethane just slides in on both sides and you shove the insert through, and that's it. But in our case, we do need to continue pressing in new bushings. And now that we've finished pressing in all the new stock bushings, the last bushings that are left for us to do are the diff carrier bushings. So we're going to start with the rears and then the fronts. With both, we need to pay particular attention to the part numbers that PowerFlex has, as they also write lower and upper on the bushings here. So in this case, upper will be upper like so. For the front rear diff bushings, you can see on the uppers, there's little notches there that clear the bracket. All the bushings installed into the rear subframe / diff carrier, and the gas tank reinstalled into the car. The rear subframe will now be reinstalled on our new reinforcement plates. Now that we've drained the oil out of the limited slip differential of this M3, we're going to refill it with Motul's Gear Competition. We're using this fluid specifically because of its high protection, as well as its ability to withstand high temperatures and its ester base. Gear Competition has a particular blue color, and that's how you'll know that fluid is in your diff. Motul's Gear fluid bottles do have nice spouts to allow you to pour in straight from the bottle. However, if you have a transfer pump, it'll make life a lot easier. Now, Dax likes to fill with the drain plug open at first to flush out any bad fluid, and then he'll close that drain plug and continue to fill the diff until it's filled. There, it's now started to overflow, so it's plenty full. We'll just take the pump out and put the fill plug back in, and the diff fluid swap is done. So now that the complete rear end is reinstalled into the car, we do have to go back and fasten all of the bolts and nuts that were in there. We do this only after applying load to the suspension, as if it's in the sitting position.
So now that Dax has tightened everything up, you can see that it's a pretty involving process. All this car needs now is a proper alignment, and then we'll be back on the road. So here at Group 2, we have the know-how, the right tools, and quality parts to get the job done right. And with that said, that concludes the Holy Trinity of maintenance items for this E46 M3. Stay tuned as we continue to restore this car to its former glory. Make sure to comment, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.